The Messenger of Allah and the Creation of the Sun and the Moon. Part 1. Taken from the History of Tabari, From the Creation to the Flood. A transmission of the Hadith of Abdullah ibn Abbas. By Muhammad ibn Jarir, at Tabari. I relate these hadith for the purposes of trying to eradicate the apparent embarrassment of some Islamic scholars, who when they have to address modern science's explanation of creation, the Messenger of Allah has explained in great detail about the wonders of the creation of Allah. Yet it seems that the majority of the more accessible Islamic scholars have outwardly ignored to teach the literal and eloquential meanings of the Messenger of Allah's explanations on these topics. They knowingly refer to the magic of modern scientific empiricism, knowledge without faith, referencing the likes of Newton and Galileo in their explanations of the ayat of Allah. They send their children off to universities and great schools of learning, earnestly waiting to welcome them back from their baptism of accepted disbelief. Their obvious delight when looking upon their student child, proudly dressed in the black of the Magi, is wonder unto itself. Cheering their offspring as they raise their PhD degrees in the air like the people of the right hand. We thank Allah for His bestowing our nation with Muhammad ibn Jarir at Tabari, and with the father of Islamic scholarship, the Mufassir and the interpreter of Al-Quran, Abdullah ibn Abbas. It is they who have preserved the method of taking what the Messenger of Allah relates, as witnessed and divine truth. Ikrimah relates, one day when Ibn Abbas was sitting at home or in the mosque, a man came to him and said, Ibn Abbas, I heard Ka'b, the rabbi, tell a marvelous story about the sun and the moon. He continued. Ibn Abbas, who had been reclining, sat up and asked what it was. The man said, he suggested that on the day of resurrection, the sun and the moon will be brought as if they were two hamstrung oxen, and flung into hell. Ikrimah continued. Ibn Abbas became contorted with anger and exclaimed 3 times, Ka'b is lying. Ka'b is lying. Ka'b is lying. This is something Jewish he wants to inject into Islam. Allah is too majestic and noble to mete out punishment where there is obedience to Him. Have you not heard Allah's word, and He subjected to you the sun and the moon, being constant, referring to their constant obedience? How would He punish 2 servants that are praised for constant obedience? May Allah curse that rabbi and his rabbinate. How insolent is he toward Allah, and what a tremendous fabrication has he told about those 2 servants that are obedient to Allah. Then he said several times, we return to Allah. He took a little piece of wood from the ground and started to hit the ground with it. He did that for some time, then lifting his head he threw away the little piece of wood and said, you want me to tell you what I heard the Messenger of Allah say about the sun and the moon, and the beginning of their creation, and how things went with them? We said, we would indeed. May Allah show mercy unto you. He said, when the Messenger of Allah was asked about that, he replied, when Allah was done with His creation and only Adam remained to be created, He created 2 sons from the light of His kursi, His throne. His foreknowledge told Him that He would leave here 1 son, so He created it as large as this world is from east to west. His prescience also told Him that He would efface it and change it to a moon, so the moon is smaller in size than the sun. But both are seen as small because of the sun's altitude and remoteness from the earth. He continued, if Allah had left the 2 suns as He created them in the beginning, night would not have been distinguishable from day. A hired man then would not know until when he should labor and when he should receive his wages. A person fasting would not know until when he must fast. A woman would not know how to reckon the period of her impurity. The Muslims would not know the time of the pilgrimage. Debtors would not know when their debts become due. People in general would not know when to work for a livelihood and when to stop for resting their bodies. The Lord was too concerned with His servants and too merciful to them to do such a thing. He thus sent Gabriel to drag his wing 3 times over the face of the moon, which at the time was a sun. He effaced its luminosity and left the light in it. This is meant by Allah's word, and we have made the night and the day 2 signs. We have blotted out the sign of the night, and we have made the sign of the day something to see by. The blackness you can see as lines on the moon is a trace of that blotting. Allah then created for the sun a chariot, with 360 handholds from the luminosity of the light of the throne. He then entrusted 360 of the angels inhabiting the lower heaven with the sun and its chariot, each of them gripping one of those handholds. He then entrusted another 360 of the angels inhabiting the lower heaven with the moon and its chariot, each of them gripping one of those handholds. Then he said, for the sun and the moon, he created easts and wests, to rise and set on the two sides of the earth and the two rims of heaven. 180 springs in the west of black clay. This is the explanation of Allah's word. He found it setting in a muddy spring, meaning by muddy, hammer, black clay. And 180 springs in the east likewise of black clay, bubbling and boiling like a pot when it boils furiously. He continued, every day and night, the sun has a new place where it rises and a new place where it sets. The interval between them from beginning to end is longest for the day in summer and shortest in winter. This is meant by Allah's word, the Lord of the two easts and the Lord of the two wests, meaning the last position of the sun here and the last there. He omitted the positions in the east, north, and the west, south, for the rising and setting of the sun in between them. Then he referred to east and west in the plural, saying, by the Lord of the two easts and the two wests. He mentioned the number of all those springs east and west. He continued, Allah created an ocean 3 farsakhs, 18 kilometers removed from heaven. The waves are contained, it stands in the air by the command of Allah. No drop of it is spilled. All the oceans are motionless, but that ocean flows at the rate of the speed of an arrow. It is set free to move in the air evenly, as if it were a rope stretched out in the area between east and west. The sun, the moon, and the retrograde stars, are filakin, swimming in its deep swell. This is meant by Allah's word. Each swims in a sphere, meaning the light of the sun and the moon are in spheres. The filakin is the swimming movement of the chariot in the deep swell of that ocean. By him who holds the soul of Muhammad in his hand. If the sun were to emerge from that ocean, it would burn everything on earth, including the rocks and stones. And if the moon were to emerge from it, it would afflict, by its heat, the inhabitants of the earth to such an extent that they would worship other than Allah. The exception would be those of Allah's friends whom he would want to keep free from sin.